after surgery, he walks in, he goes, I got some good news and bad news. What's the good news? He goes, well, the tumor, while it is cancerous, he said the type of cancer it is very non-aggressive. He says, I think you're going to be okay. I said, what's the bad news? He said, try to move that arm.
I walk in redemption.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Sit Down with Michael Franzese. Hope everybody's doing well. All is very good, very blessed on this end. As always, I give all the praise, honor, glory, and thanksgiving to our God for that. As you can see, I'm still not home in the studio, actually in Tuscany, Italy. And we had a great time here for the past couple of days. My daughter, Mikkel, got married yesterday to a nice young man. His name is Webb. And it was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony. Really enjoyed it, overlooking the beautiful wine vineyards, or I should say grape vineyards here. It was just fantastic, though. It was always her dream to get married, either in Napa Valley or in Italy, something like that. So we were able to work that out for her. But it was great, just family, very intimate, but wonderful. They did a great job, and Italy is so beautiful. And thank you for all the well wishes that I've been getting. We posted a photo of it, and so many of you have been so gracious and kind in that regard, and we really appreciate it. We thank you for the well wishes and the prayers for their marriage, and we certainly hope it'll be blessed. I think it will be. You know, they're two good people. I just got off a terrific interview with Russell Brand. He interviewed me on his podcast. He's great. Russell is just terrific, speaks the truth. You know, I just love his honesty, his sincerity, his boldness. And we had a really nice chat, and hopefully you'll tune into that and enjoy it. I'd love to get him on my podcast one day, so I think that'll happen also. And I'll be home next week. You know, I'll be back in my studio, so things will get back to normal. I have a pretty busy September coming up, but we're very, very committed. I have a new team at work, and we're putting some great content together, great interviews, a lot of good things coming up. I think people, you're really going to enjoy what we have planned. You know, I want to say this. Every once in a while, you come across a guy that becomes, or a person, I should say, that becomes very special to you. And there's a gentleman that I've known now for about 2 years. His name is Brett Oubre. Comes out of Louisiana, very successful guy, very wealthy guy, and a very down-to-earth guy, and a brother in Christ. And he's had some real obstacles in his life, and some real tough things to overcome. And he's recently wrote a book, but his take on things are really good. You know, he's a Southern boy, and these Southerners have a real good take on things. You know, my favorite senator is John Kennedy. I just love the way he, you know, just expresses himself, that good old boy thing, sharp as can be. But there's an honesty about them that I really appreciate. And Brett and I have become very, very close. I really have a lot of respect and love for the guy right now. We're business partners as well as good friends and brothers in Christ. And he has a story that's pretty fascinating, a story of overcoming obstacles, a story of, you know, determination, not giving up, and I mean real obstacles. And so I sat down with Brett because I said, Brett, you wrote a book and you're starting to speak a little bit now. People have been, you know, very interested in his story. As a matter of fact, on October 5th with John Maxwell, we're going to be in Vegas. I think you're going to be able to get tickets. We're going to put it up here. There should be a place to get tickets for it. And Brett's going to be one of the speakers along with myself and John Maxwell and a few others. And I think it's going to be a great event, something you may be interested in. It's all about leadership, overcoming obstacles, determination, negotiation. Great, great, great session I know we're going to have for the day. But I want you to hear his story. I really do. You'll be hearing more from him. He and I are doing a lot of things together, and somebody I've really come to appreciate and come to love. So without any further delay, my good friend, dear friend, Brett Oubre. So Brett, I've just alerted my audience as to our relationship, how far we go back, and really what I view as an incredible story. And, you know, I want to start out with a term because I think this typifies and exemplifies your story that my good friend Mike Tyson has said. And he said, life is all about turning your adversities into an advantage. And I believe you've done that to the nth degree with some very serious adversities that you've had in your life. And the way you've been able to turn that around and accomplish what you've accomplished is pretty amazing. So I'd love you to tell my viewers, you know, what the adversity was that you faced. But, you know, initially, just talk a little bit about you growing up. I know you have a lot of love and respect for your dad, that he had a major, major impact on your life and still does. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, a little bit about the path that you were on, and then, boom, out of nowhere, all of a sudden, something happened.
Right. Well, I think one of the things that, has been mutual for us is that I know you had a lot of respect for your dad.
Yes.
And I have a lot of respect for my dad, so that made a big impact on my life in a positive way. And I assume the same with you. But me, I grew up very humble beginnings. As strong and powerful as my dad was in respect to honesty, morality, integrity, spirituality, we didn't have a lot. And him being in the ministry, they didn't pay a lot either.
Right.
And especially during those times. And so I just remember being a kid and going, I want more out of life. I want to do more. I want to be more. And we were in this very low income area, very low income type of housing, but it seemed hopeless. Like, how do I get from here to here? And how do I bridge the gap when you can't really see it?
And what city and state was that?
That was Lake Charles, Louisiana.
Okay.
And so, I go to school just like everybody else. I go to high school just like everybody else, but I still can't see it. And I finished school, I finished higher education, and my world was going to be to stay in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Whenever I looked for jobs and positions, I wouldn't look outside that area. When you keep your circle like this, you see life as, well, there's nothing good going on around here. There's nothing good going on in the world. There's no opportunities. Well, there's no opportunities if I keep my cocoon such as this. And finally, I moved and I changed, opened the areas of my expansion of what I would do and where I would go. Now, I didn't go very far. I went from Lake Charles to Baton Rouge. My dad left his ministerial duties and went back in the secular world, and he and I pooled some money together. It wasn't much money, and we bought a little business. And we moved to Baton Rouge, and we started operating that business together. And we did that together for 4 years to the point where that business needed capital. And my dad didn't have enough business acumen to go get that capital. I had the business acumen, but I didn't have his credibility. And my dad couldn't see it. My dad's like, I'm not going to borrow that kind of money. He goes, I'm not, because it was a lot of money. It was $10, $12 million. And my dad just said, I'm not doing it.
And what business was that from?
We were an oil jobber. So you know some stuff about that from your previous past. Well, I think we've talked about that before. And so we were selling fuels, lubricants, grease. Dad and I did a good job of going out there and loading the sales up. But we needed the credit to carry the receivables, and we needed the credit to go acquire more product. And so my dad just said, I'm not doing it. He goes, I'd rather go to work for somebody else. I'd rather make my money. I'd rather go home and not think about it. And so we ended up selling the company. And I'm back to this, okay, this is where I thought my life was going to go. Then all of a sudden, this is where it's at. And for whatever reason, at those times we didn't have the internet job boards. Answered an ad in the New Orleans Times-Picayune for a sales rep. I didn't even know what the company was. Had no idea. Just looking for a job, scouring through it. They call me, I interview, I get to the job, and the job's autotrader.com. At the time, it wasn't much thought about. It was a very small company. There was not a lot of people. I think I was in the first 20 employees they hired. It was internet advertising. We're talking about late 90s. Nobody really did internet advertising. And so it was a big deal. So I started selling. And, one of the things that I kind of fast forward is I had several sales jobs prior to going to work with my dad in Baton Rouge. And every one of them, I kind of failed. I would get ready to get ready. Okay. I would go to work. I'd fix my desk up. I'd put my pencils and my pens together. I would have my ad machine in a certain way. I'd have my planner ready. And I'd say, well, tomorrow I'm going to get in the car and go call somebody. And then I would do it again the next day and do it again the next day. And then Friday would come around and I said, well, Monday's a good day to do that.
So you kept putting things off.
I kept putting things off, and in sales you can't.
You can't. But let me ask you this: you said that from an early age you had this this desire to succeed or get out of your environment or do better than what you were doing at that point. You just saw a higher ceiling for yourself. Do you think that was just something innate in you? Did somebody instill that in you? Or was that just part of your character, your personality, or who you were?
I think that a lot of it came from my dad, even though my dad, like we talked about, that capital loan, my dad had a desire to do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, and he instilled that, but just like where my ceiling became, it was hard to go from here to here in the visualization in your mind.
So, okay. But I see in you, your father might have provided an example, but I think it was something within you, just your desire to get out of the spot that you were in. Not spot, that's not the right word, but just the way you grew up, you thought there was something better. And so you're motivated, you get in business with your dad. That does okay for a couple of years. And then you explained what your dad didn't want to go proceed further with that. So now you're in sales, internet sales, which was virgin territory back in that day. Okay. And you just said you had failed at a number of sales positions before that.
I think it was 10.
10. All right. Well, that's a record of failure for sure. But it didn't dissuade you at all.
It didn't dissuade me in the regard that I didn't quit trying to go.
Mm-hmm.
But what happened is, and that's what I'm trying to instill in the folks that I'm mentoring. What happened is I didn't get proactive. I didn't go out and try to bring in resources to help me.
Mm-hmm.
I waited till my back was absolutely against the wall, and it was either go or no go. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I was working at autotrader.com. I started out the first 4 or 5 days. I was doing all the things that I just described to you. And then I was like, hey, I got a young baby. I've got a wife at home. What am I going to do? I got to provide for these. The procrastination's over. I went out. I made a sales call. The guy bought.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward, by the end of that year, I was the #1 salesperson in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they didn't even think about at one point. They weren't even going to make Louisiana a territory because they said that it wasn't internet savvy enough. They wanted to be in places like Austin and New York and Boston where it was really wired already. And the second thing, they didn't think that the area was big enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was beating all those areas. I was beating California, I was beating New York, I was beating Florida, and the whole 9 yards. Now, the part for people to understand is I had trained myself as a salesperson,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't believe in what I had trained myself to do. Yeah, I knew the
No way.
presentation. I knew how to overcome objections as far as the wording. I knew all of the processes. It would be similar to a doctor who would sit there and know how to do surgery, but they would be insecure as to how to execute it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I was. When somebody told me no, rather than saying no to my offer, I thought they were telling me no as a person.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why I thought the person inside other than fear of, and I think the fear comes from the fear of failure. Like, not that they're going to tell me no in the yes or no to my product, but it was fear of failure for me
Mm-hmm.
as putting myself out there on the line and whether I'm going to succeed or fail as a person.
So there was some kind of an insecurity that you were dealing with.
100%.
Did that insecurity show itself at any other time in your life prior to this?
In my mind, your first step in anything that you want to, anything you want to achieve is the first thing you have to do is repair the self-esteem. And as I went through that and broke it down, I think there's areas in your life that you can have high self-esteem and areas that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
People think a lot about the way they look, but they may be scared to go achieve or execute on their goal because they're scared of failure. For me, there was areas that I was very confident in, and there was areas that I wasn't. In that area, I was not. And I think I've always been socially anxious. That's not where I kind of thrive. I'm more of a small group kind of person, and that's kind of putting yourself socially on the line, and I never did like that. And so now I'm forcing myself to go into an arena that was adverse to what I was not accustomed to. But I also think that that translates to other people, because while it may not be the same specific thing that I'm doing, there's the same concept applies to them.
As you're achieving all this success in sales, did that insecurity eventually go away?
I wouldn't say it went away. I would say that my confidence came up. I mean, the insecurity's still there now at some point. What I mean by that is the nervousness, right? I'm going to try this new thing. And when I go to try this new thing, when I jump in, it's that nervousness of, will it be successful? Will it won't? Did I prepare the right way? Did I go down and look at all the factors for or against before I did it? Not in a sales call. I mean, I'm way over that in regards to a sales call. But in other things that I go out and try for the first time. But what I think now is the difference, as I've trained myself and equipped myself, I don't call it insecurities, I think it's healthy unknowns that I have to go explore.
All right, so now you've succeeded in this internet sales. And what's the next step?
Well, I succeeded in the internet sales, and I did very well. And I moved up through that company. I became the sales manager, district sales manager. I took the area that was there was 20 districts. It was number 19. I took it to number 1. They considered that a medium market. They moved me to a major market. I took that one. That was number 20 to number 1. That one was number 1. The one I had just left was number 2. They brought me to their corporate office in Atlanta. I became head of training, and so they wanted me to train all the salespeople. That they thought I could translate that process to everybody else. And so I did that, and then they moved me into business development director. And what they wanted us to do was look at the country and see what was underperforming and what matched, to see if we could go in there and raise the market share by firing people that weren't doing well and bringing in a new team.
And what was the time span of this?
4 years.
4 years. Okay.
And so we were pregnant with our second kid. My wife at the time is in the hospital. The baby was born 7 months. They didn't have the technology they have now. And he lived about a month and died. Well, as soon as that happened, she was like, I want to go home, want to go home, want to go home. Because when it happened, I was out of town. I got back the next day, and so she wanted to get back in that support system. So I quit that job, and I had met some guys that were in the auto industry, and I went in with them on a used car line. And that's how I got started as an entrepreneur. And that's where the fear came back in, because really didn't know anything about the car business other than I had sold to the car business. You know, I had sold cars for a short period of time when I was like 18, but this was a new adventure, so to speak. I knew how to sell, and I thought, hey, I could take some of the knowledge that I had in sales and I could translate it in this, but it was new because I was in charge of making sure this thing went, and it had to go because it had to pay me. And so I do that for, I think it was 5 years, and I hated it. I came in every morning, I hated it. Now, I had 7 partners. And
7 partners.
I had 7 because I didn't have any money. I mean, when I left that job, and I think this is what important for your viewers to understand, even though all that success that I touted, still didn't have any money. I mean, I was a young kid getting started, had a family. I was still getting out of debt from school and everything, all the other expenses, buying first house and cars, and I didn't have any money. I think I had 50 grand, and I borrowed 50 grand from a bank on a 90-day note. And I went and I put 100 grand in. That only bought me 25%. And so we started doing well pretty quick, but that was strapping it on my back. I was there till 11, 12 o'clock at night. But every single moment, I hated it. And
what did you hate, the sales? Or?
Just the whole business?
Well,
Used cars?
fast forwarding without going through every detail is what I've learned, what I hated was I hated the fact that I couldn't control my own culture. I hated the fact that I couldn't implement my own ideas because I got in with an established set of guys and they're good guys. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong, but I wanted to be able to flow out what that looked like as far as culture, process, and the type of talent we were going to bring in, what we were going to cultivate. And that's the reason that I came up with. So there was a piece of land that was next to the dealership, and I'd look at it every morning. I thought, hey man, I can build a shopping center there. I had an idea because when I was 16 in Lake Charles, I was working for an insurance company at the time, and it was a part-time job. I'd come in and change their trash, change the light bulbs on the sign, file some of their stuff. And they had a son that did commercial real estate development. So I'd go in there, and while I was changing his trash, I'd talk to him about that. And so it kind of always thought, man, I'd like to do that. And he was a major developer. He just officed out of their insurance office. And so I kept talking about that. And I had a friend of mine, Grant Cardone, and he's in the development business. He was doing apartments at the time. I remember this as well. And I kept calling him, for 2 weeks, and I said, hey man, this piece of land, you know what I could do? I could build a shopping center. I can visualize this. I can visualize that. Well, we're 2 weeks into it, and he finally says, hey man, don't call me back until you take action. He hung up on me. The next morning, I made an offer on it. 30 days later, I closed on it.
Did Grant help you, or? No.
No, I did it me. And I'd done okay at that time, and I had enough money to pay the note for 10 months. There was no plan. There was no contingency plan. There was no backup plan. And this was a multi-million-dollar project. I still can't believe that the bank loaned me the money to do the deal. And one of the out parcel tenants that I got to go there, I made a friendship and a relationship with their director of corporate real estate. And I started doing deals for him all across the Southeast. And that was with the money that I had to carry that project. Well, while I'm carrying this project, 2008 hits. At this point, I got multi-millions of dollars worth of debt. And all of a sudden, the commercial real estate market does this, and banks say, we want all commercial real estate out of the bank. I'm undercapitalized, got heavy debt. Here I'm in a situation I've never been in my life. The doors are knocking every day with a new lawsuit because the banks want me to move the loan. I wasn't behind on payments. I wasn't behind on the taxes, but they didn't want the loan in the bank. Here I am, I don't know what to do. All I'm saying is I was raised by a dad says you buy it, you pay for it. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do? I'm burning cash. I'm paying this stuff. The bank wants me to move it. All the appraisals are down. I have no idea what to do. My son, I don't know, he was 5 or 6 at the time. That morning I get up, one of the mornings I get up, and all this is going on. The sheriffs are knocking at the door. They're all suing me. And I decided to go to an LSU football game. And he says, hey, Dad, before you leave, would you sit down with me and watch Star Wars? I said, okay, I will, son. And I said, but before I do, I said, I got to move this table upstairs. I go to move the table upstairs, and as I'm walking up the steps, I have a seizure. Next thing I know, I'm in the hospital. And the ER guy comes in and says, you have metastasis brain cancer and you got 6 months to live. Now, fortunately, he was wrong. I didn't have metastasis, but I did have brain cancer. I went to see a specialist. They said, can we resect it? We're going to resect it. He said, we want to do it. He said, can we do it next week? And I said, well, how about 2 weeks? How about give me an extra week? 2 weeks from then, they resected it. I woke up from the surgery, couldn't move my arm. I was paralyzed from here to here. Now I can move it. But what I would do is I'd get up in the morning and I'd go to the office, the real estate office. I would leave there and I'd go to physical therapy, and then I'd go home. And with a legal pad, I sat down and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because you've done all these things that I've been talking to you about. And I kept coming back to I wanted to lead, train, motivate, and mentor people in the auto industry. And I really had felt like I had failed, which I did in the auto industry because I quit and I gave up. And that's an important piece, is when you quit and you give up doesn't mean you can't go back and get a new start. You know, and so, you know, the short version is the tumor and the brain surgery made all the banks disengage. They go, we don't know what's going to happen with this guy. We want to work something out, or we want to help him stay in the bank, or we're going to give him a good deal to get out of the bank. So all of a sudden, within 60 days, all that cleared up. I got offered a deal to buy a bunch of real estate, went to a close friend of mine. I didn't have the money to do it. I was too debt laden. They weren't going to do it for me. I went to see him to say, hey, do you have a bank that'll do this? He said, we got a family trust. They'll give you the money. They gave me the money. He said, all I ask you to do, I said, you want a piece of it when I sell it? He goes, I don't want nothing. He said, you just give me the money back when you're done. Another blessing on my behalf.
Well, that's adversity into an advantage, even though you didn't engineer that.
I didn't engineer any of it.
Yeah. I wish
mean, that's all divine engineering.
Yeah. It's amazing, huh? Sometimes we think when things happen and they put us in our worst position, ultimately, oftentimes it turns into a blessing.
Well, you're talking about adversity to advantage. I mean, whenever the doc came in after surgery, he walks in, he goes, I got some good news and bad news. All right, well, what's the good news? He goes, well, he said, the tumor, while it is cancerous, he said the type of cancer it is very non-aggressive. He says, I think you're going to be okay. Okay. I said, what's the bad news? He said, try to move that arm. And I tried to move it, I couldn't move.
On October 5th, myself and John Maxwell, for those of you that don't know who John Maxwell, just about everybody does, he's a top guy in leadership. He's a Christian, but he talks about leadership, and just a great guy. He's written a number of best-selling books, speaks all over the world, and has a great following. He and I are going to be together on October 5th in Las Vegas. We'll put the information up, and it's going to be a 5 or 6 hour seminar that we're holding. We're going to talk about negotiation, mob style and legit style, and leadership. And it's something that you shouldn't miss. We're also going to have a VIP dinner for a select few afterwards. It's going to be a limited audience. We're not opening it up too many, so go on the site, click on, and get your tickets now. And I look forward to seeing you then. Vegas, not too bad.
I said, man, I'm not worried about that, doc. We can cut that arm off. I said, but it can't come back from death. Only Jesus was able to do that. And he thought that was funny, and he looked at me and said, son, you got the right attitude. And so to turn adversity into your advantage, the attitude is key. And that's been my, and I know that's kind of a cliche term, but the easiest, the concepts that are success principles sound very easy. And everybody has them. Where the difficulty comes through is the execution. And then the daily discipline of actually doing it. I know you and your family, y'all love to work out, right? And y'all are all in very good shape. I've met all your family. But if you stop going, what happens?
Get out of shape.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that same thing happens in all the other areas of your life. So I was able to divest myself of a lot of that real estate portfolio. I bought my first car dealership. I started implementing those processes, and it's been fantastic ever since.
What was the first dealership?
Ford. I bought a Ford store.
You still have that one, right?
I still do. I haven't sold any of them.
And along the way, you've made a lot of progress as far as the tumor.
Yeah, I had some setback on the tumor, and that's part of, keep fighting. Is in 2020, I had a pretty major seizure, and I went to the doctor in New Orleans, and the doctor says, it's grown, and that's the reason for your seizure. He said, but it's not grown enough that we need to do anything about it. Let's just watch and wait. Well, I'm like, let's watch and wait, but I'm having these seizures.
It continues to grow, yeah.
He said, well, we'll give you some of this specific type of seizure medicine, and it should stop the seizures. And it did for, I don't know, a couple of years, and then they came back. But they came back in a different way. Instead of being a full unconscious seizure, they were seizures that were just on the left side of my body, so I'd be awake. I could sit here and talk to you, and they would continue to happen. And so when it came down to, the doctor says, hey, in order to move forward, we're going to need to do chemo and radiation. Wasn't comfortable with that. And it was because I started doing my research, and I started looking through chemo and radiation, and a lot of the data that comes back now is that chemo causes secondary cancers. And when you talk about radiation, especially in the brain area causes dementia. Well, if I got another 20 years left or I got another 5 years left, my thinking and my cognitive ability mean more to me than any other things that I have. Because I want to be quick, I want to be fast, and I want to be able to understand. And so I started looking and saying, maybe there's something else out there. And so I started looking by reading papers that doctors wrote. And that's when I came out to California, as I found the #1 oncologist in the United States, if not the world, that operates out of Santa Monica. And he's doing this revolutionary treatment that the month before last, the amount of shrinkage that I had, it was uncanny. In fact, it was so uncanny that him and his nurse practitioner couldn't believe it. And they were excited and high-fiving and the whole 9 yards. But
praise God.
Yeah.
And this, what was the time span? When did this, when did you first get the tumor or know that you had the tumor? What year was that?
2012. It was October the 12th of 2012.
Okay. So you're dealing with this now with about 12 years. But progressively it's gotten better.
Yeah, and incidentally, in 12, they told me that if I was doing good, I'd live about 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years. We've already passed that.
I'm past that. And the other thing to understand is I had the surgery on the 25th of October. I was back to work the next day. No, I'm sorry, second day.
Second day,
because I was in the hospital the first day. And the guy comes in. He had told me before the surgery that I wouldn't be in but a day. So he comes in and he goes, well, your arm's not working. We're going to have to keep you here 30 days. I said, man, I'm not staying here 30 days. He goes, no, man, you can't move that arm. I said, man, I'm going to go home. I'll strap it up. I'll find the physical therapist New Orleans is just like any other community. There's another subdivision area that's probably 30 minutes away. It's kind of like, Orange County is to LA type of thing. And he goes, no, I really think you need to stay here. So I jumped up out of bed and I took off walking down the hall to show him that I didn't need to stay there. And he comes running out in the hall and he goes, hey man, your arm's not working. You're going to pull it out of socket. He goes, you convinced me. I'm going to release it.
Sometimes you got to show them, right?
But where I was going with, that's a funny, but where I was going is that Dr. Kalickia, he was the surgeon. He said that 90% of the people that go through the process that you go through give up, lay in bed, and they never get better.
So much of it is
it's
up
all
here.
right.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, that's, as we've gotten to know each other, how that parallels is, the distraught and lack of hope. Probably not much different as sitting in the hole in jail.
No. Well, they told me I'd never be a free man again.
Right.
Based upon everything they were going to do to me and tried to do to me, but I didn't accept that. So, different circumstances, but similar drive and determination and will to overcome.
Oh, it's the same deal,
Yeah.
though, really. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you said, it's a different path, but at the end of the day, it's the same deal.
Yeah. And people need to understand that, you know, your mindset is everything.
Hmm.
It really is. And I mean, that's been proven even statistically and with data. People that, you know, are determined to overcome a bad situation, even when it concerns your health, the positive thinking is very important. Very important. Because when you give up, it's almost like your mind gives up and your body follows.
And never accept the first opinion that you're getting.
Yeah. Diagnosis or opinion. Yeah.
Just because I mean, like you, let's go back to you and the stuff you went through. I'm sure you talked to 15 lawyers and everybody had something different to say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well,
And it's the same kind of thing, right?
lawyers and doctors have similarities.
Right.
In certain, because listen, a lawyer, you know, at times is diagnosing your future,
Right.
whether you're going to be a free man or not. And a doctor is diagnosing your health, you know, how long you're going to survive. So, yeah, they're similar in that regard. And I agree. I mean, you never take the first. And it's okay to question them to the nth degree. You know, sometimes they get a little huffy about it, but it's your life, not theirs, you know. And you did exactly that, and so did I. And it's worked out for both of us.
Mike, I can't tell you how many people since I've gone through this that when I hear them diagnosed with cancer, because the guy out here, he will consult on all cancers because his research and his implementation works with just about anything, and he will bring in the specialist that works there, that works on that particular specialty. And I've only been successful getting 1 or 2 out of maybe 50
Really?
that'll do it, because it's almost like they fall into this process where they can see the train coming, but they can't get off the track.
Yeah.
Because it's like, no, my doctor said we do 1, 2, 3, 4. And we talk about drive and determination. You got to go down the road. Like you and I are getting in the car to go to Sacramento, and then the road's blocked, and we got to look around and say, what do we do? And we got to find that alternative path. It may not look exactly like we thought it was getting there, but we get to the end result if we're able to get off and go. But if we keep going, we're going to run into the roadblock.
Yeah. You know, that's true of so many things in life, you know, and really a lot has to do, it's all in the mind. I mean, you know, something as silly as this, you know, I have a date to make, and I'm in a remote place like, what was it? Sedona, Arizona. And I had to be someplace the next morning. There was just no way to do it. I mean, flights at every possible flight, no way to do it. So what did I do? I rented a car, got in a car, and drove 8 hours. Now, a lot of people are not going to do that, you know? But I said, hey, I have to get this done. I'm going to figure out a way. You know, I exhausted every possibility of flying, so I'm getting in a car and driving, and made my date. I mean, but a lot of people, and it's simple. It's not anything. You're not a hero for doing that. It's just your mindset. You know, that, hey, I have to be someplace. I'm going to make it happen no matter what. I'll figure it out. And, but people don't understand how critical that is when it comes to something like your health. Believing in yourself and saying, no, I'm going to fight this until the end. And I'm going to go the distance with it. And, you know, even in people where ultimately it doesn't work out, they tend to live longer anyway.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? If it's something that eventually is going to be fatal, they still tend to live longer. I've heard that many times. I was supposed to die 3 years ago, but I wasn't accepting that.
I got a friend of mine that has blood cancer right now. We talked on the phone 2 weeks ago, and I could tell he was down. And he was resigning himself to the fact that, man, I don't have any opportunities. I said, man, you're listening to the doctor in your hometown that has been schooled to say, here's the flow chart, here's the flow card. You know, we spend, depending on what education you do, we're told to go get 20 or 18 years of lower education, then we're told to get 4 more, which is 22 years, and then some people go get an extended, make it 25, 26, in a doctor's case, maybe it's 30. And then we quit.
Yeah.
Well, if it took us 30 years to get here, then why don't we continue?
Exactly.
And these people that continue to grow, whether it's in business, whether it's attorneys, whether it's doctors, whether it's in any field, they continue to grow. And that's what I think you have to do to continue that mindset, is you have to grow yourself to continue down that path.
And in your case now, you have, over the past 12 years, you have 7 dealerships.
I do.
And growing, still buying more.
That's the goal.
Been very successful. You're also invested in other businesses. You and myself have a business relationship other than a friendship.
100%.
And now your desire is to mentor people, share your experiences and your advice, because I think you get a lot of satisfaction out of that. And I think also as a person of faith, I think you feel somewhat, I don't want to say an obligation, but maybe a responsibility, because I think you adhere to the fact that to those of us who have been given much, much is expected in return. So we do our part. And most recently, you wrote this great book, 12 Steps to Boundaryless Success. And maybe can you just explain the title?
Well, I heard Jack Welch say, first question I always get is, what does boundaryless success mean? Boundaryless mean? I heard Jack Welch say that years ago. People that don't know who Jack Welch was, he was one of the, at the time, he was probably one of the best CEOs that had ever been in the big companies. And I wrote it down. And, boundaryless means exactly what it says. There are no boundaries.
Well, let me ask you, that Jack Welch kind of had a real impact on you?
Oh, I read it, I went into education mode when I heard a speaker speak at a autotrader.com orientation. And he said, if you read an hour a day and in a subject for 5 years, you become an expert in it. So I decided on the business side that I was going to do that. And I read everything he ever wrote. So yeah.
For you, it was Jack Welch. For me, it was Lee Iacocca.
Oh yeah.
Chrysler. His book Straight Talk.
My dad liked Lee Iacocca.
Yeah, he had an impact on me. It was the first business book I ever read, and really the only business book that I still think is just really says it all. And his amazing turnaround of Chrysler was something to really talk about. But anyway,
we need Lee Iacocca again for our Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram dealership.
Absolutely.
So the 12 steps came in my mind is that me growing up, as we talked about, I kind of took off running. I hit that wall. I backed up. No guidance. Like I said, my dad was a fantastic guy, but when it came to personal growth, self-growth, business growth, he wasn't that guy. He just got up every morning and he did it. But there was no, hey, this is why we do it. It was, boy, get up and do it or else kind of thing. And so I thought, if I could write 12 steps, and I don't mean get up in the morning at 5, read your journals. Most people understand all that stuff. I'm talking about 12 concepts that when I apply them to my life based on who you are, is going to shorten my runway and helping me get further faster. And it's a book. I published it myself. I don't really care if it ever makes money or it don't. I just want to see it widely in publication because I think it will help people. And if they can, what I've learned is if I can borrow from other people's failures or I can borrow from other people's lessons, I don't have to learn them myself. And that helps you get a bigger potential on what your talents are. And so that was the idea behind this book and how it came to pass. And I learned something in this book too, right?
Enjoy writing it?
I did. When I say I learned something, I started it. And all of this, we talked about having the seizure, the dealerships. I had it in my mind to write that book. Probably 25. Not this specific book. I just wanted to write a book. And when I was 43, when I had that seizure, and whenever all that came down, all of a sudden time shortened. And I was like, I'm not going to get all this in. I'm not going to do all the things that I want to do if I don't do it. And that's when the idea was born. And guess what? I still didn't do it. And that's something that people need to understand. Like I said, I waited till the last minute for a lot of things. I still didn't do it till a couple of years ago was the finish, and I started 2 years before that.
Mm.
Yeah,
But you got it done.
I got it done, and I got number 2 in the hopper that I'm writing right now.
Great. Let me ask you, how much of a role has faith played in your life?
Oh, it's 100%. I mean, my dad was in the ministry. I mean, you know, he taught me since I was that high that, you know, God gives you everything you have, and God can take everything that you have away, and that, you know, that you apply His principles and His faith in your life, and it's going to grow. If you take away from those things, you're going to see yourself go in a direction you don't want to go. And he wasn't talking about money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, as far as money, I don't need a lot of money at this point. I didn't need a lot of money before this point. I was just as happy before I was doing well financially as I am today.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's
but
interesting. Yeah.
but what money allows me to do is money allows me to gives me options, and money allows me to create an organization where we can grow people, lift them up, help them raise to their potential, and while doing that, they take our other team members and they're doing that with them, and as we grow, we're expanding and reaching more people in that regard. And then, like you said, I mean, you and I've had this conversation, is there's something bigger brewing that's going to end up in the faith-based side, reaching folks.
Well, my friends, Michael Franzese here, and I am very excited to introduce to you all our non-alcoholic wine. Really excited and proud about this, because I'll tell you why. Our process is a little bit different. This is real wine. It's not grape juice. It goes through the normal process of fermentation and everything else that wine goes through. An amazing process, by the way. I love sitting down and listening to these sommeliers that are really knowledgeable about the process of winemaking. It's amazing. So we get a bottle of wine, and then in the end, we boil the wine and remove the alcohol. So the taste of the wine is still there. Tried it myself many times. We have both a semi-sweet and a dry wine, and it's really terrific. And I think all of those of you that don't want to drink wine, but want to hold that glass and enjoy something that tastes just as good, maybe even better to some of you, this is it. Non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand, one of a kind, first online, and then you'll be able to get it in markets throughout the country. This is really an offer that you shouldn't refuse, and I think this is going to be so appealing to all those of you out there who want the real taste of wine and want the enjoyment of having a glass of wine with your family, but not getting maybe some of the side effects that alcohol will do for you sometimes. So pick it up, non-alcoholic wine, Franzese brand. Again, I always give you an offer that you shouldn't refuse.
Let me ask you, when you first were diagnosed with the tumor, was your first inclination to turn to God?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think we all do that. It's kind of like, you know, you finish up, you know, food on December 25th, and the 26th, you look in the mirror and say, you know, I'm going to change everything about my life. You don't pray for 6 months and you get diagnosed with something terminal, and then all of a sudden you got the Bible open and you're, you know, I mean, absolutely that was. In fact, I remember the night before brain surgery, I was nervous. I was scared. I couldn't get any peace. And I was walking up and down the hall, up and down the hall, up and down the hall. And I read a verse in Philippians, and all of the anxiety went. I even went in and watched my son and my daughter sleep. And all the anxiety went away. All the nervousness went away. And no matter what doctors have told me since then, I've never been worried about it again.
Oh, that's what God will do for you. You know, it's funny, Brett. You've had the situation to the extreme. I went into, you know, the tube to get a what do you call that?
MRI?
A CAT scan or whatever. I didn't like that feeling. I just don't like to be enclosed. You know, I mean, I wasn't. This first time I got a little nervous, and then I had an upper and lower GI, and it was really, I've been very, very blessed with good health most of my life, and I just didn't like laying on that cot and feeling helpless, and it was no big deal. It was just a routine thing. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the feeling at all. I wasn't praying because it wasn't serious, but I could just imagine, you know, God forbid, you know, you ever have a really health scare and you got to be under the knife with something so serious. It has to be frightening, and God is really the only way to turn at that point, to give you some peace and comfort in the fact that whatever happens, it's going to be okay because God is in control.
Hey, you can't force it, and that's where I see most people that are straddled with a lot of anxiety. They try to control it, and they try to force it. You know, I had a pretty severe alcohol problem at one time in my life, and I went down this road where my life would be in chaos, you know, and then all of a sudden I said, well, I got to stop drinking. And the analogy that I've always told when I talk to people about it is I would walk in and go to a program, 12-step program, and I'd walk in and I'd say, here, God, you hold this. I'm going to go take care of this. And then as soon as the chaos would subside, I'd say, okay, God, give me that back. And I'd put it back in my pocket. And I would start over. When I got to the 5th time, I was worn out.
Yeah.
And I said, here you go, I'm done. And Mike, the minute I did that, which was February 6th of 2020, I knew at that moment I'd never drink again. And I've never craved it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with people who do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with alcohol. It's just, I've already drank all mine already.
That's good. Well, I have a surprise for you, and you have an interest here. We have a nice non-alcoholic Franzese wine for you. So
that's awesome.
And it's not going to tempt you to drink anything else, but it tastes pretty good.
It's good.
Yeah.
You liked it? I know you're a wine connoisseur. So.
Well, you know, my wife is better at that than me. Her palate is better, but I tasted. We have two. We have the dry and the semi-sweet. I tasted the semi-sweet, and I like it because it doesn't taste like grape juice. It tastes more like wine, because a lot of non-alcoholics wine, they taste like grape juice.
Yeah.
But it didn't. But I want to taste the dry. I haven't tasted that yet. But if it's comparable to the semi-sweet, I think we've got a great product. Yeah. So I'm excited. People are so far accepting it, loving it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's got pretty is the non-alcoholic wine or the existing customers bringing it in as a SKU or?
Yeah, we got our first SKU in day before yesterday.
Nice.
So we're excited about it, and we're starting a marketing plan with it. And I think, well, you're involved. You're going to know about it.
Yeah, I know.
But it's going to be a big part of what we do. I really do, because non-alcoholic beer now is like the #1 selling beer. It's amazing. It's meaningful in the industry. So
I see. I'm from Louisiana, so I never thought that. I thought that if you didn't drink, something was wrong with you.
Yeah.
And you know, now it's the reverse. And obviously, I have no problem with drinking because, you know, we're in the wine business.
Yeah.
Together.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we want everybody else to be drinking.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and it's funny too. I get sometimes, come on, Michael, you're a Christian, and you know, how could you be selling wine? And I said, listen, you don't understand your Bible. I said, let me just point this out. I said, the first miracle that Jesus performed was turning water into wine at a wedding that I'm sure he was participating in and drinking wine. I said, it was common. People said, well, wine wasn't the same back then. No, but it was still wine. There was an alcohol content into it. Mm-hmm. How do I know this? You know, being in prison, we saw, you know, guys make hooch, they called it, you know, out in the backyard in the hot weather. And somehow they got yeast and they got alcohol into the beverage that they were tasting. You tasted it, it tastes like grape juice. But that night, if you drank 3, you're drunk.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. I know, because the night before I was going home, Brett, we're sitting out in the bleachers, and, you know, they made some hooch, and we were celebrating. It was Sunday. I was leaving on a Monday. And so it tastes like juice. It didn't taste like anything. Well, that night, I was so sick, right? I was in my bunk, and I kept going up to go to the restroom, and the guard was sitting out there, and he says, Franzese, are you drunk? I said, damn well right, but I'm going home tomorrow, so it don't matter. I kept getting up and going to the bathroom probably 10 times. I had the worst hangover. But you didn't taste it. You didn't taste it. So yes, it might have had less alcohol content back then, but it was still potent, and it was still wine.
Right.
And, you know, and then I remind them, I said, you also forget that at the Last Supper, Jesus served wine, okay, to his disciples, and they drank it, and then turned it into miracle to his blood. I said, so please stop. I said, you don't drink to your excess. That's a sin. Drunkenness is a sin because of what you can do, the sin you might commit during that time. So I just want to straighten that out for all the Christians out there. But yeah, we're in the business. We're excited about it. And, you know, it's great that you're a partner with us. And I think we're doing very well nationally, and I think we're going to be a global brand. So, and the non-alcoholic is certainly going to add to that. But having said that, Brett, great story. And I think people are going to be encouraged, and I appreciate you sharing it with us. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I think, there'll be a time when you and I, we did it once. We'll get on the stage again together. And
We're doing it in October in Southern California.
oh, that's
with
right.
John Maxwell.
With John Maxwell. That's right. Do we have a specific date yet?
We have the date. We're locking down the venue right now.
Okay.
I want to say it's October 6th, but I'd be telling you, I could probably look it up.
Okay. Well, just for all of you out there that live in Southern California, we're going to be together, myself, Brett, and John Maxwell. That's a good lineup. So we'll see you all then. Brett, thank you again very much. I
It's
appreciate
October
it.
the 5th.
October 5th. So
Yeah.
keep that in mind. We'll be announcing it prior to that, obviously, and it'll be a good day. So you're going to hear 3 pretty good stories that you can be encouraged with. All right, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.